ready to do life and business on your terms and truly live your big ticket life. You either make excuses or you choose to level up. What amazing guests living the big ticket life. Woo! Woo! Brandon Brittingham.
Appreciate you having me here today, man.
It's that kind of discernment, that kind of focus, that kind of forward thinking that's so important if you're going to succeed in business today.
Jeff and I are like friends. We're real friends.
We are and so you unlock fortune and freedom without all the stress that normally comes along with it.
It all comes down to your why. Your business, why are you doing it? How is it going to change the world and what's it going to do for your family?
I want you to celebrate your success.
Talk about the struggle, but I promise you, the story is in your struggle.
They'll never be able to say that about me because people only see me working hard in anything that I'm doing whenever they see me.
Focused on your success and the success of those around you.
But being that constant in your community, good or bad, whether things are great in the community, bad in the community, who's steady?
Unapologetically do business and life on your terms and truly live your big ticket life. What amazing guests living the big ticket life. And we discuss how they do it and the big ticket methods they use. The things that make your life successful so you do life and business on your terms.
In and of itself, the only limitations that we really have on ourselves is the ones that we allow to be put on ourselves. And most people don't look at it in that perspective.
There's nothing wrong with being humble, but there's also nothing wrong with stepping into your superpower and letting people know who you are.
Get ready to do life and business on your terms and truly live your big ticket life. All right. Feels good to be back in the saddle. Another episode 64 of the Big Ticket Life Show. I've got my fellow friend in Apex Entourage, Charles Cannon, joining me. Welcome to the show, Charles.
Hey, Jeff. How you doing?
I'm good, man. Appreciate you being here. You saw some of our Apex friends there. Going to do a little housekeeping. First of all, I think I got to thank my producer, Chris, from Cast Ahead, Chris Stone, because I think he touched up some of the graphics and stuff on that intro. It was looking pretty tidy there. So I appreciate that. And if I'm dreaming it, it looks really good. So that's an endorsement of Chris and his work, because there's no way I could do 64 episodes of a podcast on this show and like 87 episodes on another show that I do in the one business I have. There's no way I could do it alone, right? So coming together as a group and a team is good. And I'm sure we'll touch on that subject today, right, Charles? About teamwork.
Yeah, absolutely.
Coming together, everybody pulling in the right direction. One other little housekeeping thing, in the Apex world, we've got a number of different events that happen throughout the year's time. I'm a fan of Apex. I'm a fan of what it does for people, how it changes people's lives, the crew it creates, right? The people you run with, the connections you make. That's how you and I are connected, Charles. Mm-hmm. And so Apex has a women's event coming up. Womenofapex.com is where you're going to go to that. So if you're a lady in business and in life, you're looking for that next level to hit that next goal, you want to be challenged, great event to go to. I sponsored it last year, happening again this year. Womenofapex.com. I believe it's mid-April, still time to get in Texas. It's easy to get into Texas, fly into Dallas. So womenofapex.com, be sure to go there. But I think that's all the business and housekeeping. So Charles, welcome in, man. Appreciate you joining me before you kick your day off. As I understand it, you've already got a couple hours in. So why don't you lead off what your day looks like for people as a general manager of a big car dealership?
Well, for me, actually, my day starts at 4 a.m. in the morning. I get up and go to the gym. It's and I usually work out hour-ish, a little bit lower, depending on what I'm doing for that day. I get home, take a shower, meditate, and get ready for my day. I usually arrive at work, before 8 a.m. And the main reason why I do it is it allows me time to decompress, think about my goals for the day, look at reports from the night before, see where metrics are for the different departments, and see what I need to do that day to make sure we accomplish what we need to accomplish.
So I'm going to venture a guess here that it's rare these words come out of your mouth. I don't have time for that.
No, I make time. If it's important, we make time for it. You don't have a choice. You have to, especially if it's something job related or one of my associates needs help with something. I put things aside and take care of them.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I would imagine the fact that you engineer your day, and that's really what you're doing is engineering your time. You know, you have a responsibility to the folks, and you're still at a Lexus store. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm a Lexus store here in this is a place called Colma, but it's right outside of San Francisco. The joke is Colma is where everybody in San Francisco buries their dead. So there's more people underground than above ground. That's the joke around here.
But everybody needs a car.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So you're still, you got a busy life as a general manager of a car dealership, and we can dig into that a little bit more in our time together. But, you said something key. You read those reports from last night in the morning, and I'm venturing a guess if you're kind of on a mission right now, but I'm venturing a guess when you're home with family, you're doing that the same way. So that time in the evenings is with
Yeah,
family. Is that right?
so for me, yeah, it is. I'm in a unique situation right now because my family's still back in the Houston area. I have 4 kids, and the reason why they're still there is 2 of my daughters. One was in college last year. I mean, one was in high school. She was a senior, and then one's graduating this year. And once she graduates, then my wife and 2 younger kids are going to move down here with me. So for me, my family, I do have family in the area, but my wife and kids are still there. And it's just our family time is FaceTime. I am fortunate. I do go home once a month-ish to hang out with them for a few days. And, my company allows me to do that. And so I hang out with them. But, unfortunately, I do miss a lot of events. But for long-term benefit, the family understands what's going on and what my mission is here.
Yeah. So tell us about that. I mean, I kind of figured that's what you would say is there's a long-term goal. Everybody's kind of pulling together in the moment for a long-term vision, a long-term plan. Walk us through that. What was that like talking with the family about it?
So for me, when this opportunity came up, initially I wanted to stay in the Houston area because I want to be by my family. But this was such a great opportunity that I feel I couldn't pass it up. And obviously, I had to get the okay from the wife. She didn't approve it. It wasn't going to happen. But luckily she did. And, it's worked out well ever since. We go through struggles, obviously. It can be frustrating because she's a super mom. She still works. She actually works 2 jobs, and she's taking care of the kids to make sure everything's done. So, luckily I have my mom and her mom and I have other family there to help her out. But which gives me a little bit of peace of mind knowing that they're taking care of if something were to come up.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. That's good that the family's on board. And it's I was a kid that moved around a lot as a child. And, it's a struggle for kids. It's a struggle for young kids, especially I think nowadays too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was too. I
Yeah.
was in the Houston area, but I went to 3 different high schools, and so I know what it's like to move around. And I didn't want my kids to experience that, especially
Yep.
my older 2 that were in high school, because that's such a crucial time. My younger 2, with one being in elementary school, one in middle school, I think they can adjust, and they're actually
Yeah.
one's looking forward to it, one isn't, but I think they'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and just as a little aside for anybody listening, watching, one thing to consider about your children, whether you have children or you're an aunt and uncle, a grandparent, whatever. The thing with kids in school today is if you think back in our time, right? Like Charles and I, we both moved around. We went through that struggle. It was difficult to make friends. Maybe there was somebody that came into our day that was a little bit of a bully or an outright bully, but you and I got to leave school and that connection, whether it was good or bad, ended. Unless you were, kind of hung out in the playground. But even then, when that ended, it ended. Now with social media, if there's something negative going on in that school life and those 4 walls of schools, it just translates right over to the phone, translates right over through all these apps that the kids are on. And, if your kid's struggling, maybe connect with them and understand that, it ain't just happening at school. It's probably happening right in their phone, following them around. Just as an aside, I mean, this is something that's kind of becoming a real problem in our nation. So I just felt compelled to share that in that moment.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you have any thoughts to add to that.
Oh yeah, no, 100% agree with that. It's we grew up in an era before social media, but right now with social media and my wife, she's a a high school counselor, and she was a middle school counselor before. So I hear all the stories that she tells about these kids, and some of these kids really go through struggles, and bullying is real, especially the online stuff and some of these social media apps. It can be pretty bad for some of these kids, which is why I encourage and I don't tell people how to parent, obviously, but you want to monitor their social media and make sure that they're on the right stuff and not spend a lot of time on it and different things like that.
Yeah, no, 100%. Funny I would bring up about that, and then your wife's a high school guidance counselor. So
yeah,
you guys know all about it. You got all the details, all the inside baseball.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when your submission to jump on the show came across, we're connected through Apex, so that's how we got to know one another. I put the call out, hey, I'm looking to fill the calendar a little bit. Really, two things about this. One, I think it's important to always have the power of your group, your power of your connection, right? The fact that somebody is in Apex with me, by and large, they cross that hurdle of being on the show, right? Because I know there's a standard of excellence that we all share. And you exceeded that. I'll straight up say it. You're the first guest I've had on my show to say, I read the template that you sent out. I prepared, I was ready, even the little lines that Chris lines up to make sure we're setting the video, you were largely like right there in the zone. Right. And so that's great. But
thank you.
The other interesting thing, and let's kind of dig into this here a little bit. So you, unlike a lot of my other guests, I think you are my first person who doesn't own their own business. So let's walk through that dynamic. You said you came out to California. You have a great opportunity. Obviously, you believe in your employer, Lexus of Saramonte. That's correct? I have that correct.
That is correct. Yep.
Okay, very good. And obviously, you believe in them. Obviously, they believe in you. You've written a book. You're speaking. So those things have impact on your time at the store. Talk about that dynamic of being an employee and how you approach your day for your employer and the leverage and opportunity they give you to do some things that scratch your itch of passion and scratch your itch of pursuit for yourself.
Well, I am fortunate to work for a company. It's this dealership's owned by Sonic Automotive, and they look out for their what we call teammates. And I encourage everybody to have passions outside their job, especially being in sales. It can be a grind at times, and I encourage everybody to find your passion, spend time with it. I encourage them to take off, especially my managers, every 90 days, take a weekend off, refresh your batteries. Because, this can be a grind, and it's okay to have passions outside of work. And as far as myself, I always tell my teammates, as long as you're getting the job done and you're taking care of your responsibilities, you don't have to be here all day, all the time. And for me, I pick and choose what things I do outside of work because my time is valuable. So I don't just sit around and do things that aren't passionate for me. But I always encourage everybody around me to make sure they do that, whatever that is, as long as it's morally ethically right. Spend time doing it and have fun.
Sure. Yeah, I love that. I love that style of leadership. Happy for you. You said it was Sonic Auto.
Yeah,
dealer?
Sonic Automotive. Yeah.
That's
the name of the
give
company.
Them a little Sonic Automotive. Give them a little shout out for creating a great culture where great folks like Charles get to lead and excel and pursue their things, and at the same time deliver for Sonic, deliver for Lexus of Saramonte. That's cool. My next question just flew right off the top of my head, just like that. It's funny how that happens. Tell me about your book. So you wrote a book, and that's not something everybody does, so you wrote that, and rules of the game. There it is. Rules to the game.
Yeah. So for
cool.
me, it was, so this is actually my second book I wrote. My first one was more of a booklet, 10 Things to Look For in a Professional Salesperson. That one was more of I called it a business card on steroids. So whenever I was with a guest and for every reason we couldn't close, instead of giving a business card, I gave my book. And
love it.
It more than paid for itself. But it was just me a dab into writing it. And so January of last year, I was like, okay, I'm coming up 20 years in the business, and I'm here by myself. I don't really have much to do besides work. So I said, why not sit down and write a book? And it had been in my mind for the past couple of years, but I didn't really take it seriously. So I just started writing, and quickly became a passion project of mine. I worked on it literally every day, probably at least an hour, sometimes two. I would just write a little bit at a time. And then when it finally came time, thanks to Apex, I found an editor that I could use, shout out to April Hall, and she honed it and made it better for me. And so on a side note, get an editor. No matter how good you think you are, they do this for a living, and she saw stuff that I didn't, and she pushed stuff and she omitted stuff, and she did a phenomenal job. So, whether you use April or anybody else, get an editor, because it just makes a huge difference. Yeah. But it for me, the book, it's a kind of autobiography / how I got in the position I'm in today. Because, a lot of people ask, how'd you get in your position you're in today right now? And so I say, hey, here's my book. And, it's, again, it's, I know Apex, they always say you should write a book. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do that. And it's done a great job for me so far. Again, it's not a New York Times bestseller. That was not my point of it. I know it's kind of intuitive what a lot of people say, but for me, it was just something to have out there and just say, I've written a book.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll pick up where you left off, and then we'll dig into the power of books, because I'm a big believer in it. When I do my consulting work with clients direct, those that I coach with my buddies, Matt and Clay, now in the Battlefield Alliance, a book is a big part of success. I mean, my office right now is a little asunder because we had a flood here on the first floor. And normally my shows are from my actual podcast studio upstairs. But because of this knee surgery, I have to sit down for the hour that I share with our great guests. But actually, right there, I'll just kind of point down that corner there. That's all books that I've either written or helped people write, or have licensed content out to others. So they kind of have a book where they were the author of the book. And I'm a big believer in the power of a book, and you used kind of my words. It's a business card on steroids. Mm-hmm. I love it. So that the first guide, as I would call it in my language, the 10 things to look for in a salesperson. Mm-hmm. Is that what it was called?
Yeah. So they look for in a professional salesperson.
Yeah. When so what inspired you to write that? Where'd you get the drive there?
So at the time I was on the sales floor, and this is before I went into management, and I talk about in the book, at that point, I had no desire to be in management. This was in 2014. So I was looking for ways to market myself and be unique and stand out in the marketplace. And I just came across that I read an article somewhere that said, write a book. And I was like, okay, I could do that. And I just wrote something down. And again, I'll be frank, it's not a great book, but the point was to put my name out there, and instead of a business card, to give them a book. And it worked. I had a lot of customers come back, and I sold a lot of cars because of it. So it did its job.
Yeah. I mean, what you did there, that was what I call imperfect action.
Yeah.
I'm sure tons of other people read that article. In fact, we'll break it down through the 80-20 rule right now. If there were 1,000 people that read that same article you did, 800 of them did nothing. They didn't even give a thought to that passage that referenced about writing a book. 200 of them were like, that's a good idea. I'll clip the article, save it in my to-do list. I'll write it down somewhere in that journal that I keep. And then they never got back to it. Right.
Yeah.
From that group of 200, 160 never pushed it forward. 40 probably pushed it forward. And then if we look at it again, 80-20, 32 of those people probably got a draft done somewhere. And you're one of 8 that got that draft done and put it out, and that's really how when you start looking at people, if you're looking to hire, and you think about, you hear something that somebody's done, start looking at it through that lens, that fractal layer of 80-20, right? Bringing it down and say, and that'll tell you the quality of the person you have in front of you. It's really an interesting exercise to go through. So kudos to you. I love it. I've got a retail mattress store, one of the businesses that I have interest in Cologne. Nice. And the first thing we did when we bought that, actually, it was done ready to mail before we turned our open sign on, was a guide called What's Keeping You Up at Night. And it was a guide about how to buy a mattress. And the whole premise was, and if you're thinking about this, if you're on the fence, if you've got a draft somewhere, if you're that person that clipped that article, if you're a person who's hearing this podcast, you're like, this is the 8th time I've heard people talking about books and guides and tip sheets, something other than a business card. This is it. This is the message. Do it. Because we had that guide written before we turned the lights on. And man, it's something that really transformed our business. And we've since expanded to other guides. And we have a book, and that book we now license back to the industry. So other retailers can be pseudo authors, which has provided an income stream to us that's differentiated. So it's powerful what those things can do.
Oh, absolutely. It brings you a level of credibility in the market, because when somebody is actually holding your book, it brings a higher level of respect, in my opinion, versus somebody that didn't, because they know it's a lot of work to write a book. It's not something you just do overnight. Yep. It takes a lot of time. And for a lot of people who don't know, yes, it takes months, years. I mean, it took me 6 months, but I know if my family was here, it would have taken me a year, because I couldn't have spent the time and not spend time with my family if they weren't here.
Yeah. Do you ever have a customer come in and say, hey, I really loved your guide. In fact, and maybe I'm filling up the answer, but
sure.
I'm sure they came back and they assessed you versus everybody else. Was your guide, your book, a deciding factor? Did they
absolutely
express that?
Yeah, they did. I can't tell you how many times people were like, I'm just impressed that you did something like this. They were impressed when they got it, because they were expecting the business card. When you go anywhere to a traditional dealership, you just get a business card. But when you all of a sudden you have a book, and it was only, I think, 40 pages, so it was small. It was more of a booklet. But just the fact you have something like that in your hand, it just builds credibility that you can't otherwise build, and it can make a difference of whether they come back to you or see somebody else. But it very definitely made a difference for me.
Yeah. So I mean, that power of it right there. Charles saying it. Other guests have said it. If it's on your mind, engineer that time. Right. If you're getting up a little later in the day and you have opportunity to get to bed a touch earlier, wake up a little earlier, do it, or work on it later at night if you're a night owl. But engineer that time, because it does pay off. And yet again, here's another guest expressing that it works. So rules to the game is a more expanded book, more of like a book, right? Sits on the shelf, like over my shoulder, has a spine. So you had something pretty cool happen just recently because you wrote that book. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I'm part of a local Davie Sealy Public Library Association, and they were looking for a featured speaker. I'm part of the committee, and they said, well, since you wrote a book, why don't you speak about it? Speak about power libraries. I was like, cool. And so it gave me an opportunity that otherwise I probably wouldn't have gotten if I didn't write the book. And so it worked out for me. I ended up speaking in front of 150 people about why public libraries are important to society. And it was a 10-minute speech, but I think it went pretty well. And, in there I did sprinkle stuff about my book. But, it just brought, again, it was an opportunity that I probably would not have gotten if it wasn't for that.
Yeah. So I'm going to kind of maybe make a little noise, rustle around here, because I want to see, and again, I want to do this because if I can find it, it's going to be, I think you're going to like it. There's something that my grandfather did connected to books and libraries back in the day. And I'd love to be able to show it. It's why it pays you as a listener, if you're just listening on audio, to watch the show, because we do cool video stuff while we're doing this show. So you should always watch if you can and listen. But either way, I appreciate your support. So Charles, tell us why libraries are important to you. How, what is it about libraries that you want to convey to people listening and watching right now?
So for me, when I was doing research on this, the initial thing people think is that you don't need libraries because you have the internet, you have Siri, you have Alexa to answer your questions. But, libraries are more than just books. They are places where communities gather. One of the main benefits is places where the underserved in our community have access to internet and books and other stuff that otherwise a lot of people wouldn't. Obviously everybody on this podcast has access to internet, but there are a lot of people out there that still don't have access to internet, that wouldn't have access to books. Librarians play great benefit as well, because they can help somebody with research. Because sometimes you see information on the internet and you think it's right, but a librarian can guide you in the right direction that's properly trained. And then obviously you have access to magazines and historical archive stuff that is otherwise you probably wouldn't have if it wasn't for a physical library. And then on top of that, they're great gathering spots for communities. People can get together and have their book clubs or different events like that can help them find other like-minded people. And one of the more interesting things that I found is that the millennial generation prefers a physical book versus a digital one. I found that very interesting. Yeah, it is. But I verified it because all 4 of my kids, they prefer a physical book. They don't like Kindles or reading on their devices. Me, I like reading on my phone or my iPad, but they don't. They prefer a good physical book. And so
have they said why that is?
They just prefer turning pages. That's what they said.
Okay.
It's they find it kind of weird reading on a digital device, even though they literally do everything else.
Right. And maybe it's like, I'm going to read. I want that time away. Reading is
Yes.
pleasurable. And
Yes.
yeah, cool.
Very interesting.
Very cool. Hey, so I found it. I found what I wanted to share.
Okay.
So my grandfather, paternal grandfather now, both of my grandfathers were very interesting individuals. My maternal grandfather had a tremendous impact on my life. My paternal grandfather was an interesting cat, immigrant from Italy, orphaned off at the age of 3 or 4 to an Amish farm in Quakertown, Pennsylvania. Was basically a child laborer through the age of 16. Had an 8th grade education at the most. Interesting life. Your laundry detergent bottle that has a little pour spout in it?
Yeah.
That was my grandfather. He brought injection molding machines over from Italy and then retooled them here and made that. And if he wasn't such a stubborn guy and wasn't such a I'll go alone kind of guy, I wouldn't be sitting here, because when Procter and Gamble came to buy that, he said, I can take it further on my own. I don't need you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and because of his upbringing, had a great distrust in government, because society had let him down.
Yeah.
His father was able to orphan the children and divorce his mother, and his childhood wasn't great, so he didn't protect his IP, and they took it.
Wow.
So yeah. So I'm sitting here today enjoying my big ticket life show with you.
Yes.
But I might have had another life where I was a trust fund kid. I don't know that life would have been any better. But what I want to show you is this. So put it on the screen here. So that's a book bus. Okay.
Yeah.
And my grandfather pioneered that concept of taking books to people that maybe didn't have access to books as much as others. And no matter where he was, he always put out, buy a book and give a book. And we'll give a book to a local library. That local library was, in fact, inner city libraries. Because he understood that folks in the city didn't have access like maybe folks in the suburbs had. And that was his way. That was his way of kind of dovetailing into society and helping people. And he was really passionate about reading. I remember their house. They had a bookstore, like a retail bookstore. And he was in all facets of books at one point: distribution, publishing, retail. So he was an interesting cat, but I figured you'd like that, because he always made it a point to get books to people and get books in front of people. And people that couldn't afford books or couldn't have access to great books, he did everything he could to get them to them.
That's very cool.
So he did that. He did that for a number of years. That was his thing. Pretty interesting guy. So at any rate, just figured I'd share that in the moment, since we got to talk about libraries.
Absolutely.
So libraries are important. Your book gave you the opportunity to speak, which is another reason to write a book, right? If you're looking for that authority outside of just publishing a book, because let's face it, today, like podcasting, anybody with a microphone which if you got a cell phone, you got a microphone that can record things. You can literally be a podcaster on Spotify for free with the free voice memo app you have on your phone. You can be a podcaster, right?
Yep.
With Amazon's print on demand and Kindle universe of things, a lot of people can write books. And I'm so glad you touched on an editor. Glad that you touched on that. So for you, writing the book and getting that speaking gig, obviously it was something you were close to, but walk through more about what the book's about and where you hope, like what that book means for you long term.
So for me, it's an autobiography. I start from the beginning where I was born to all the way to to the time I walk into the door and start my first day here at this dealership. And I go through my ups and downs. I talk about my personal life. I talk about how I met my wife. I talk about how I first got into the car business. I talk about some high and low points. I got fired one day. When my wife was pregnant with our last child, and how I recovered and just said I'll never be in management again, because at the time I was a pre-owned manager, until here I am, 10 years later as a general manager of a dealership, in charge of 80, 90 people, make sure they're well taken care of as well of our guests. So just talk about the mindset of what it takes and what it takes to be successful every single day. And then at the end, I kind of talk about, when I taught the rules of the game, I talk about 20 things that I feel would make somebody successful, not only in sales, but in life in general.
Yeah. Very good. And I like that you shared in the pre-show that it's about your legacy.
Yeah.
This is something that your kids can read as they pick up a real book, right?
Yes.
Your kids can
absolutely
read it and see what.
Yeah. Or they can hear me, because I have it on Audible as well. So I did it on that version as well.
Yeah, that's cool that you do that. Not a lot of people take that step. That's cool that you did that too. Smart, because for the folks that want to read a book on a device, that want to read a book in their hand, or want to listen to a book, you got all the bases covered. Really smart.
Well, really smart. So for me, actually, when I came out with right before it was going to come out, I had a couple people comment, "Man, when are you going to do an Audible version? Because I don't read." I was like, "Okay, let me do it." So I just sat down and figured out how to do it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a real smart lesson, because as a student of marketing, I really I feel I can hold my own in the marketing game. One of those things is put your messages where people will respond, and make it as easy as possible to respond. There are businesses today that still have fax machines, believe it or not.
Oh yeah.
And one of the, and by and large, it's in your more upper crust professions, to generalize, your lawyers and doctors. And I know there's marketers that have tried to cut out fax as a response. Marketers try to cut out direct mail as a response. But the reality is, what's it matter to you if your customer, if your client, if your listener, your person who wants to read your book wants it in Audible, give it to them in Audible. They're raising their hand saying, "Hey, I'm interested." Right.
Yep.
So just a little lesson to think about as you put your marketing out there, whether that's a book, whether that's an offer, make it easy for people to respond. So walk us through, your general manager of the store now. And you said something, I think it was in the pre-show, if my store can't run for an hour or so without me, that's on me, right?
Yeah.
You as the leader. So walk us through, like, what's the kind of culture, what's the kind of way you're getting everybody to pull in the same direction? Kind of walk us through some of what Charles has to share there.
So for me, it's one of the things when I look at reports every day, I kind of watch for trends, and, I just kind of direct my managers about what I see. And I always tell them, look, I welcome feedback. Just because I see it my way, that doesn't mean that my way is the only way. And so I empower them. I tell them, look, this is not a dictatorship. We work as a team, and the only way we're going to succeed is to succeed as a team. And I emphasize that every single day. I let them know that, I'm not going to allow bickering and back and forth and undercutting and stuff like that. I always refer, if one of their direct reports comes to me, first thing I always say is, what did your manager say? And a lot of times, unless it's just totally asinine, I'll just say I'll side with the manager, because I have to trust them, and that's the whole point. You trust them, you empower them, And if they do make a mistake, then I'll pull them to the side and say, hey, I disagree, and here's why. And a lot of times we can come to a solution to the problem at the time.
Yeah, yeah. So the last few years have been really, and I like the way you manage there, because you touch on something. You got to trust your people.
Mm-hmm.
I'll kind of step back. Let's peel into that a little more. You do have to trust your people. With me, with this knee surgery, I hadn't been to my retail business for about 6 weeks. At the same time, my business partner in that business was in the Bahamas the week I had my surgery, and that bled into the week after. He also was able to maintain, and did maintain, his regular 3-day a week at the business schedule. No fires happened. Four walls are still standing. Sales numbers are great.
Yeah.
Because we trust our team and we empower our team. And I loved what you said about, you don't have to do it my way. You don't have to be like me. It doesn't have to be exactly as I say. You don't have to be a robot and deliver the same script verbatim all the time. But I'd imagine you have guideposts, you have guardrails.
Mm-hmm.
There's barometers and benchmarks, and you referenced it. I look at reports and I look for those KPIs, right? You look for those certain things that you want to see happening. Have you found that that's the better way to go, or would you have?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Where
so
are you on the
have,
control barometer of things?
So I would say, like, if it's like an analogy, be like a bowling alley, you have your bumper lanes. You allow people to kind of stay, as long as they stay in those lanes, they can kind of do what they need to do. Now, there's certain processes that we have. We internally have it called playbook. There are certain things that have to be done every single day. It has to be done the same way consistently. And to me, it's no different than I tell the guys all the time. When you go to a McDonald's, whether you go to McDonald's in Florida or in Texas or anywhere else, it's going to be the same food the same way every time. Why? Because they have a consistency involved. And so that's what we're trying to do here at Sonic Automotive, is make sure we have a consistency involved. But it's a little different because obviously we sell different products and stuff like that. And I tell people, look, you're going to inject your personality, and that's okay. But just make sure that you are following the process that needs to be followed.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. We had in the retail business, unfortunately, a 1-star review come in, and it was interesting because the review was something along the line of, so much for customer service. I bought a mattress, they delivered it, never heard from them again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on the surface, you read that and they're like, well, this customer bought it, they delivered it. What's the problem? However, we communicate. We don't one night stand our customers. We call all of our customers. It's going to be a week to 2 weeks, depending on the flow of things, after we've delivered it. Hey, do you love it? You happy? Were you happy with the experience overall? So, because we believe in that. My peers in that industry, they will not make those phone calls because they're afraid that the customer is going to want to return it, which I think says more about them than it does the customer.
That nothing more frustrates me. We deal with that in our industry in general, and I tell them, one of the things about being an auto sales is that it's instant gratification. And so a lot of the salespeople mindset is instant gratification. And so it's out of sight, out of mind. And I tell them, look, the key to long-term success in this business, and really any sales business, is building a relationship with your guests. And that means you care for them after the sale as well. You follow with them after the sale. You call them the next day. You call them 5 days, 2 weeks, 30 days, 90 days, whatever the case is. And you're calling to genuinely build a relationship to make sure they're happy with their product. And you do that, you do it with genuineness, they'll come back to you tenfold because, they like you and trust you. And the problem is, a lot of times, like you say, there's some people who are afraid to hear what the results are. And I said, well, no, actually, that's a great time, because you can be a hero, because the problem's going to be there whether you call them or not. And you really be proactive and say, okay, let's fix it. Even if it's not your fault, let's take ownership of it. Let's fix it. Let's make it right so we can, make the guests happy. And so, unfortunately, that is a mindset that the amateurs have. And I tell people, if you want to make this a career, really any sales career, you got to follow with your guests, because it's too hard to build relationships with finding new people all the time. You want to make it to where, I equate it to like a 10-speed bike. When you're first, you're first pedaling your bike, you're pedaling fast, you're doing this, but then as you slow down, you're going the same speed, but your gears are switched. So you're pedaling slower, but you're going just as fast, and not faster. And that's because you build relationships. You have a lot of repeating referrals coming back to you, and you're having the same results, but with less effort. And it just takes time to get there initially. But I tell everybody, you spend 2 or 3 years doing that, the sky's the limit.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that. So I end up replying to this review personally. And this is the thing. I think business owners are so afraid of, reviews that aren't 5-star, right? Like, you can't give us a review for 5 stars. We want to know. We want to keep it out of the public sphere, out of the public eye. We don't do anything like that. We trust in what we do because it is a process, and I think there's 4 of them in 13 years that are a 1-star review. And I will happily say all earned. This one, even though we didn't change the software issue that created the problem, we're the captain of the ship.
Yeah.
Right. And what actually happened is, in our CRM and our software, the plugin that makes the task kick off and send to my sales manager to make those phone calls, the way the number was put in, I forget how it was exactly. Either the software didn't recognize the dashes or it needed the dashes. I forget exactly which way it went now. Doesn't matter. Point being, this person, probably out of the 7 steps in our Wake Up Happy promise we communicate, the one that resonated with them the most is number 7. We're not going to one night stand you. We're going to call you and make sure you're happy.
Yeah.
And everything else didn't matter to them. Right. It was because they were probably burned before, where you touched on it. Problem existed and no one called.
Yes.
I love to say I had a conversation with them. They chose not to call me back. Maybe they will. They have my personal cell phone number. I sent them a text message. I sent them an email. I'm going to move on. We fixed the issue. And I explained what the issue was, but we leave that out there. We don't try to scrub that, because
you can't.
There is a human element to this.
That's the thing. If you have 100 5-star reviews, I'm going to look at that company funny, because I'm going to say that's not, you're human. You're not going to make everybody happy all the time. It's actually good to have some, below 5-star. Obviously, you don't want a bunch of them, because people can pay attention to see how you respond to them. And, matter of fact, whenever I interview somebody, I tell them, I say, hey, look at our Google reviews. Look at us online. See what our guests say. Because you want to work for a place to where they have consistent reviews. They take care of their guests. And when the issue does come up, they address it. Whenever we get bad reviews, I always tell the guests to call me directly, and we try to rectify it as quick as possible. And that's what we do, because it's going to happen. It doesn't matter. And a lot of times I tell my guests, or I tell my teammates all the time, look, it may not even be your fault. They be mad at some other dealership, but because you were the one who put a Google review, a lot of times they'll just put it on there and just do it that way, and that happens.
Yeah,
but you have to deal with it.
Yep. And if I had to guess, we let that customer down.
Yeah,
with that 7-step. Own it all day, every day. If I had to guess, probably there was a bad day that happened. Maybe it was a bad week. They saw an ad online. They heard a commercial. Maybe they got an email, and it was like, all right, now's the time to hit that. You know what I mean? And again, that doesn't absolve us of our responsibility, but that just, listen, there's humans on both sides of this thing. I guess that's the point. I want to touch on as we look to wrap up. So the last few years, and before I go into what the last few years have been like in the car industry, everything we just touched on, real important, because I've never been a Lexus owner. Share that outright. I'm a pickup truck guy, but
I'm wrong with that.
Yeah, maybe if Lexus makes a pickup truck, you know who to call first, right? Because actually right now, and I'm a Ford guy too, but right now I'm not a happy Ford guy. So there's opportunity for the Chevy and Dodge guys out there. Just saying. Anyway, at any rate, I would imagine a Lexus buyer is a long time Lexus buyer. That's my assumption and observation. Is that right?
Yeah, they are. There was actually a study done by CarMax I read probably last year. Lexus has at the time the highest loyalty, and their Lexus RX has the RX models have the highest retention out of any model out there in the industry, period. So they do. They have a lot of loyalty. This store does as well. This store was one of the original 50 dealerships that opened in the country in 1989 when Lexus first came out. So so they have a long time customer base. And we have a lot of repeat referrals because people love their Lexus like they love Toyota. It's good, reliable product, great vehicles. And their, reliability is probably one of their main things, and the technology's there as well. So they're great vehicles overall.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine if you're, and again, this is kind of, we're going to turn a page like into marketing here. I would imagine the avatar is somebody that, somebody that's not affluent or not well established financially. If they want a Lexus, they might save and stretch to a Lexus, as well as somebody who is affluent, like Lexus is their thing. It's right in their lane. And then I would imagine it even covers folks that are affluent that could afford a car more upline, the Porsches, right? As a daily driver, but they didn't get that level of affluence by spending it foolishly, right?
Yeah.
I would imagine Lexus touches that buyer as well.
Absolutely. They do. They have a range.
Yeah,
they do. You have your cars at price in the mid to high 30s, all the way up to, our LX SUV is 120 grand. So, you have a wide variety of vehicles for a lot of people. And yeah, you're right. They do work with all brands of people. But, luxury cars, I always say, are frankly, they're status symbols. They're emotional buys, because if it wasn't for people's emotions, they would just drive a box. But there are different cars out there, different brands for a reason.
Right.
That's right. There's a reason why it's like that. It's because people love showing off, and a car is an extension of their personality in a way. It's for some people it is showing off. Hey, look what I've done so far to succeed. But others, it's good, reliable transportation. But they want to splurge on themselves a little bit for their hard work they've done in life.
Yeah. So the last few years have been difficult for your industry. Supply chain issues, the chip shortages, any and everything. I mean, every industry's had some struggles. So what were some of the ways that you manage that? And are there a couple like success stories where you're able to make a customer happy that wasn't expecting to be made happy, maybe as soon, or they wanted something, didn't think it would be available, but you were able to make something happen?
Yeah, so it's a little different. So at the time I was in Houston when COVID hit. So it was a little bit different here in California. I know in California, they basically shut down. In Texas, we didn't. And, I would say industry wide, it was a great reset. And the reason why I say that is because, in the past, a dealership would have 500 cars on the ground and to sell cars. But then they realized that, they can have 150 cars and be profitable, and the manufacturer be profitable because they don't put a lot of incentives out there. So it was good in that way. I think it's been a record for guests because people who have cars have gotten all-time trade-in values for their cars that they normally wouldn't get. Especially, some of these cars, I've seen people literally drive them for a few months and get the exact same money that they would as though it was brand new. I mean, who would think that would be the normal case? But that's still the norm. And even right now, wholesale prices are going up. So I tell people, it's still a great time, and it's going to be like this way for the foreseeable future. And the reason why is because 3 years ago today is when, or this month is when, COVID first hit and we started having the supply chain issue. So, it's just not a lot of pre-owned cars out there like there were in the past. So I would tell people it's a great time. Obviously people are going to say that it's cliche, but it really is a great time right now to have a pre-owned car. And if you're looking to trade into a car to sell it, we are starting to see more as an industry, more cars come out there than versus last year. And it's still trending in that direction. And of course, every manufacturer is different, so I can't speak to all manufacturers, but a lot of them are on their way back to being what I call the new normal of how it's going to be.
Right. So I'm going to put you maybe on the spot, maybe not, but I'm going to ask the question because I think it was an important lesson for some car stores, some operators the last few years. So how did you guys approach the market adjustments on cars that happened the last few years?
So for us, my philosophy was I want customers long term. Yeah, and I know there are dealers out there that were just absolutely price gouging, and I can't speak for them, but I always think that there's a thing called car karma out there, and people have long term memories. And if you price gouge them now, they're going to remember that. And they might necessarily come back to your dealership, but as an industry, they're going to remember because all of a sudden they're way upside down because they paid 50 grand over or whatever the case is. But the other side of it is that the market bears what the market bears. And so if every car in the market is selling for 10 grand over, and if you even looked at people are flipping these cars and selling them for 20 grand over, then there's nothing wrong with the dealer asking for 20 grand over if the market dictates that and it's a normal market. So it's kind of a two-edged sword in that situation. Right. But for us, my goal was to be the lowest in the market. It still is right now. Do we have markup on certain vehicles? Sure, but not many of them. And it's very minimal. I price shop all the time. We have analytics that we use, and I always constantly make sure that we're the lowest in the market when it comes to that, because I want long-term customers. I want long-term. I don't want people to go, "Oh, you're the dealer that crazy markup." You're the dealer that was very fair.
Yeah. Well, you started it and you ended it with, "I want long-time customers," because I think the lesson that some missed, your store not included, but some others missed is, if you can charge 25 grand over MSRP just because you can. What does that say? In the car buying process is pretty transparent. Like there's not a lot of hidden things that the buyer and the seller have for the most part. But when that car goes in the shop for repair, and now you're questioning the bill 2-3 years later, what's that customer, and they're not mechanically inclined, so now the transparency is gone a little bit or completely. And they're like, these guys charged me 25 grand over. I really wanted it. I had the money. I had a good trade. So I bit the bullet, but I just don't feel good about this repair bill now because they set that tone 3 years ago when I bought this car. And that's the thing I think some miss. Is that a fair observation?
That is a very fair. Yeah. They thought short term, and you have to think long term in this business. Unfortunately, absolutely. That's the way a lot of people were.
Absolutely. Charles, man, I've enjoyed our time together.
Yeah, same here.
I know your day is getting ready to kick off out there in California. You're ready to lead it with greatness. So I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. We've been flashing on the show as we've been broadcasting it. Your website. People want to get a hold with you. They go to Charles. Is that Charles L. Cannon or I?
Yeah, CharlesLCannon.com. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. Yeah, just reach out to me on there.
Yep. Your book's called Rules to the Game. You can put that into Amazon, Audible, and get that. Kindle too. And so any way you take in books, you can get it. Rules to the Game. So search it up in whatever platform you want to get it in. And if you need a Lexus, you go to charles.cannon@lexusofsaramonte.com. I'm sure you can help somebody out nationwide. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, we have dealerships all over the country. Be happy to.
There you go.
If nothing else, even if it can't buy for you, I'll be happy to give you some advice.
My man, appreciate you. Appreciate you for that. All right. Very good, Charles. It's been a pleasure. Really appreciated the time we had today. Thank you for taking the time out of your day. And I'll say hello to your family. I'm sure when do you get to see them next as we wrap up?
Next month. I was just there last weekend. They spent the week out here for spring break. So yeah, it'll be next month sometime.
Cool. All right. Well, have fun in April with them. And there's your family right there.
Yeah, that's my middle daughter, the one that's going to graduate this year, and my wife.
Very good. Well, happy times. Congrats on her forthcoming graduation, man. Again, appreciate your time. Thank you for taking that time, and we'll see you next week on The Big Ticket Life. Everybody take care. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode of The Big Ticket Life. You've heard from another amazing guest living their own big ticket life, and now it's time to live yours. First, I'd love for you to take me up on my free gift to you. Claim your gift at gift.thebigticketlife.live. That's gift.thebigticketlife.live. See, all your life you've been told what is and what isn't possible by the loudest voices from the cheapest seats. It's time to finally do life and business on your terms. Sure, you've heard similar things, but without clarity on what can be done, it's easy to have your customers, employees, maybe even partners, and your spouse keep you from truly living a big ticket life. My big ticket methods shift you into that investor seat in your business, away from commodity and away from competition, into a market of one, so you can finally live your own big ticket life. So my gift to you is for you to book your discovery call today, where we'll uncover first the Chivo behaviors, those chief everything officer behaviors that hold you back, and why moving into the investor seat in your own business is critical. 2, we'll uncover the premium position that's up for grabs right now in your market that you're missing out on. And 3, which big ticket methodologies are just waiting to be dropped into your business to explode your sales and profits. So again, thanks for listening to this episode. I'd love for you to take action right now. Accept this gift. Book your call. Go to gift.thebigticketlife.live. Again, that's gift.thebigticketlife.live.